what you find is people actually don't know who they are. They don't know themselves. When you start to know God, you start to come to know yourself. And this brother, he just sat at the end and he goes, I wish I knew this knowledge from before. I wouldn't be getting divorced right now.
If you want to grow your money but are not sure how or where to start, or are just petrified of the amount of interest and haram surrounding investments, download this, the Halal Money app. A neat and easy to use app that makes investing your money into halal certified investment funds super easy. They've done all the work for you so you can invest in peace. Download it now. Let's get back to the podcast.
Assalamu alaikum, brother Mohammed Isaaq. It's an absolute honor and privilege to have you on today joining us. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. It's a blessing for me and I'm honored to be here as well. Alhamdulillah.
Right.
Well, how are you guys doing?
Welcome
Good.
to OnePath Network. How'd you find the studio?
Beautiful place.
Yeah.
Beautiful
It's our new
place.
place. We've just settled in just a couple of months ago. It's not too bad, not too shabby, huh?
Yeah, no, I love it, mashallah.
How does it compare to Birmingham?
Birmingham's got its
shall I
own,
say?
it's its own world, just as
Yeah.
most of the world. You know, every place has its thing, and but it's nice, it's beautiful. You know, it's got that ihsan, and I think that's the most important thing.
For those who don't know, I mean, not to my own horn here, but myself and Isaaq kind of go back for about maybe 5 or 7 years now, and I'm honored to call you a dear brother, and if I may say so, a mentor of mine. So it's an absolute
Brother's
privilege.
fine.
Brother, yeah.
Less pressure.
But it's nice to
Alhamdulillah.
share this platform with you.
Alhamdulillah.
It's
I
an
am
absolute
honored.
dream. So I'm honored to
I remember,
see
I think you said that to me once, and I just said, "And you're my mentor." And that's it. So we are to each other, you know.
Mashallah.
Mu'min mir'atul mu'min. So we're just mirrors to each other, inshallah.
SubhanAllah. I think
Yeah.
that maybe touched my ego a little bit as a 16-year-old, but I've learned my ways.
Alhamdulillah.
It's a beautiful way. Malik, you started off the podcast by asking a very important question, who am I?
Very
And
pertinent.
that's a very important question we all need to be asking ourselves at home. But given that you are our guest, our special guest, who are you, Mohammed Isaaq?
I am. There's various parts to me. You know,
Mhm.
there's the outward and the inward, and we won't go too deep.
Let's not be too
Let's just go with the
philosophical.
outward. You know, I'm from the UK in Birmingham. That's where I come from. I'm born and raised.
Birmingham Sharif.
And
Shout out,
that's
Birmingham.
pretty much who I am. I'm just like everybody else. One thing I would say is I was a bit more serious in terms of like what's the purpose of life, and I think that really assisted me, not just what I did in the UK when I was a bit younger, but also what I did when I went and I left and I searched for what would be sacred knowledge and God, and so I went from being a kind of a charity work, youth work, engineering to a maths teacher to eventually teaching what I do now, which is a bit of Islamic studies as well as
Know yourself.
helping people, knowing yourself. I mean, this is one of them, one of the many programs, alhamdulillah, that I'm involved in. And what spurs me on really is just, there's people out there who need the beauty of our deen, and how can we get it to them? And the whole idea is speaking a language that relates to them. And I think that was always my concern growing up. Just an everyday person, from an everyday person's perspective, why is it not presented to us in this most beautiful manner, and how is it not relatable? And that's my thing. It's just bringing it back to the
Contextualizing
relatability.
it in the time, packaging it in a nice way for.
I mean, it's
the
almost an
audiences.
injustice, isn't it? I mean, how many of us had that experience where we had a teacher telling us about the characteristic of the Prophet ﷺ, where he would smile
Sallallahu
whilst that person wasn't smiling?
Mm.
And how many of us had a person who smiled and we fell in love with that teacher? We really we couldn't let go of that. That's the difference of actually bringing the tradition versus kind of talking about it. I think that's why I like this place. I said to you guys straight away, the ihsan, because you're doing what our tradition is about, and that's what people want to see.
Ihsan is huge. But I guess it also comes back to knowing yourself. Like, we know who we are. We're creatives, content creators. I would like to think I know who I am. And we know that we're in the creative space. So we're like, all right, we're here. How do we become the best at what we do? And that's what we really try to do. And hopefully our viewers at home can see that and forgive us for our shortcomings. Talk us through this know yourself thing. Like, what drove you into developing a course to get people to know themselves? Talk us through this.
It's interesting. So I think like just my own life, kind of growing up and being involved in a lot of charity work and youth work, I kind of realized that, you know, there's a lot to know about the self, and in this pursuit of saving the world, we realize actually I'm a contributor to that. So what is my contribution to that? How do we actually save the world? And then when I realized it's you can't save the world outside if you don't save the world inside. And God never really called us to save the world. he said, "Qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara," right? Save yourself and your family. So that spurred me to kind of go into an inward journey. I listened to some, old school lectures where Sheikh Hamza Yusuf really just that kind of really rectifying and changing our condition. And that led me to actually go on a really real journey of self-exploration, learning about the tradition of Islam, seeing greatness in our wonderful teachers. And it spanned from, from South Europe, West Africa, East Africa, Asia. And then I guess since that, it's been beyond to the Americas, Australia, and so on. But what I found was that one of the most consistent things in all of who we are is self-knowledge. You can invest in your gym life, you can invest in your Arabic studies, but one common factor you have between the two is who you are. So the more you know yourself, you're drawn to really just bettering everything in your life, from your relationships, from your Arabic studies, everything, your salah, whatever it may be. And in bringing the tradition back, I asked myself, do I teach an Aqidah class? Do I teach an Arabic class? And I did those, but I realized that the crisis of our time, what you find is people actually don't know who they are. They don't know themselves. People are defined by constructs and what they're exposed to. And then there's a lot of anxiety that comes from that, because people actually don't know what is it that they want to do. They'll see you now, creatives. Oh, shall I be a creative? But the secret, and I know you guys can attest to this, you've read The Room with God. You've understood where God has led you to, which is how you've come to understand and know yourself. And there's a beautiful saying quoted quite often. Sometimes it's referenced as a hadith. It's not, but it's "Man arafa nafsahu qad arafa rabbahu." One who knows himself knows his Lord. And this is commented on many different traditions. A very interesting phrase. But the point of it's not necessarily. The point is, when we invest in that, nobody goes on a journey of anything amazing except they face themselves. So I concluded, let me do this kind of a presentation on knowing oneself. And so I brought various sciences that I covered from prophetic principles and from classical medicine, which is what I've always been. I've also, alhamdulillah, have had the honor of studying and translating it into simple psychological terms. And then that brought the journey of kind of studying Islamic psychology and so on. So that's the point, is give people what they actually are looking for, and then they'll go on and do everything else. So mashallah, a lot of students then go on and do theology and Arabic and other stuff. But it's find where people are. And Islam has the answers for so many things. So why are we not, Allah talks about in the Quran, الَّذِينَ أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. Now that's telling us two interesting traits of these people, of the Quraysh, that they would feed people and keep people safe. We have a time where there's so much anxiety, depression, mental illnesses. So one of the things is keep people safe. And how can you keep them safe? Is be like, just follow this road, become that designer or whatever you want to do. Look at your skills, and helping a person establish a career, like alone, using classical frameworks and so on. It's like,
where do you think these issues stem from, though? Because I think there's more of like a social angst. Is this being amplified? Because we've mentioned before, much of our podcast, this common theme of everything being like we do live in our own little silo chambers, but everything's being over glorified and like over amplified. So do you think it's coming from like the usage of social media? Where are these ideas falling into? Because I don't think it's necessarily a new thing. And I can see that the problem's actually been rooted probably far, far before then. Like even if you look at the French Revolution, for example, a lot of these things that just stem out, like we also hear like man's being removed from the garden, and it's like the secularization process. I mean, it gets runs a bit
100%.
deep.
No, look, you got to understand that the modern world we live in is based off what? It's a secular worldview. So a secular worldview therefore has everything that tells you about yourself. If you find a self-help book, does that self-help book consider your soul? Does the author recognize the soul? Now, if he doesn't recognize, or she doesn't recognize the soul, and the framework of psychology doesn't include the soul, how could it ever cater for your affairs which are rooted in your soul? It's incredible, isn't it? And then if you then consider it from that angle, is there better help and psychological frameworks and offers of assistance and development? I mean, what is self-development if not good character?
How to perfect your character.
How to perfect your character. So it's not even a contest. Look, modern self-help doesn't even help the modern man. Secular self-help doesn't even help the secular man. That's why everyone's on drugs and drinking, and you know what I mean? So when you see our communities, who don't realize the romantic movement and its impact on feelings, and therefore I feel, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Right? There's a scientist saying I think, therefore I am, and we have people now saying I feel, therefore I am. That leads to I post, therefore I am. Therefore, if I'm not relevant on social media, then am I existing anymore? Do you have followers? How many followers do you have? This whole phenomena, I mean, this is so erroneous and problematic, and we have the answers. So that is the current pursuit that I'm sharing just my small efforts with.
Yeah.
And these are things that help me. So I'm really just helping. I'm sharing. I go in a class and I say, look, I'm going to talk to myself for the next few hours. Maybe you want to take notes if it benefits you, and if it doesn't,
So what framework do you use in getting people to know who they are? I understand that you use the concept of temperaments, the 4 different temperaments, and getting people to understand that so they can then go on to understand themselves. Could you walk us through this?
Sure.
I guess in a nutshell, like summarize this concept, because I'm sure it's very complex.
Of course, yeah, it's quite detailed. Like in a nutshell, in our classical medicine framework, we have this idea of nature. Modern psychology mostly consists of our nurture, meaning who we are what has happened to us. What has happened to us has led me to be who I am. It's very Freudian psychology. It's, this happened to you, that's why this is the way you are. But we had this concept of nature, tabariya, mizaj, this type of stuff. And this was something that was really useful. And when you can figure out what mizaj you have, what tabariya you have, this is just one aspect of classical medicine frameworks. You have the aspect of, I could bring the concept of ruh into, for example, self-love, right? This idea of people feel like they need to give themselves some self-love, right? To look after themselves and feel like I'm giving things away. But how can I do an action like, I don't know, play PlayStation, put a face mask on, whatever. How can I do those things and not feel guilty? So we have in our tradition the understanding of you have a ruh, a qalb, a aql, and a jasad, or a nafs. Now you quickly just ask yourself, what does this activity serve? If it's serving something related to your qalb or your ruh or your aql, these would be slightly more virtuous things to do. But if it links to your nafs, it's probably going to be bad. So the idea that you want to do something without a higher objective related to the akhirah or God or the hukuk of Allah or people who you're responsible for, like this is a basic framing of how I can measure whether my trip to Dubai is a good trip or a bad trip. Do you know what I mean? So if it works for just that, imagine like at the Bariya framework about your nature, about your mizaj. So what we do is we try to help people to come to know themselves in automatic reactions. It's a simple framework, sanguine, choleric, melancholic, phlegmatic.
It's like a personality test.
It's like a personality test. It's a little bit more detailed than that. The tradition was very holistic. And so you had the physical and mental and spiritual components, character, the virtues. I mean, this is how spirituality was spoken about. How much virtue do you have? The Prophet ﷺ said that I was only sent to perfect noble character. Right? This is very interesting. So then spurred from this was ilm al-akhlaq and many other different sciences, hikmah medicine and so on. So you had a hakim, and these were people who were acutely aware of the physical phenomena and the mental and the spiritual, whilst being rooted in the Islamic tradition really well in theology and fiqh and the rest of the sciences. And so you had these people who were really treating people in a very holistic manner. So it was like, are you feeling bad? Or what did you eat? Rather than just saying, talk me through yesterday, right? It might just be like I need a paracetamol, like I have a headache. So rather than rushing to a paracetamol in maybe modern medicine, traditional medicine was like, well, what caused the headache? Right? Did you drink water? Did you talk to that person again that you said you weren't going to talk to, who's ruining your life? Maybe don't do too much of that, right? Maybe don't be there. So it's a very holistic. So when you try to bring like classical medicine, which is known as alternative medicine now, and you try to bring these principles kind of back into the modern framing, you see how our tradition, I mean, so many of our scholars use that. You have Balkhi, Farabi, Razi, so many of these incredible references and frameworks and work that was done. And there's so much more. There's a book called The Polished Mirror, if anyone's interested, and they show classical frameworks on the heart mirror, right? The polished mirror, and how you had all these frameworks established, psychological frameworks or psycho-spiritual frameworks that included various aspects of who you are, and that guides people.
Definitely.
Fascinating.
You've worked closely. You've mentioned in your classes with a Hakim yourself in London. You've mentioned one thing in your class about how by grinding spices, you're more aware of a person's personality. Can you talk a bit more into
Yeah,
that?
I mean,
It's
that's
an interesting thing.
Yeah, again, it requires a lot of explanation, but the idea being is that that there are like what Allah says, "Sanurihim ayatina fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim." Right, there are signs outside and there are signs related to the inside, meaning that you can make incredible connections with the world outside and the world inside. And in our tradition, part of this experience is that it's the dunya, but also part of this experience is that it's the alam. And alam is the ism ala, which is basically the noun for a tool, right? Meaning that the alam now becomes a tool for what? Alima, to know. So when you see the world as a tool to know, you start to recognize how God has put signs outside for you to come to know God and to come to know yourself. And so it's very complex, but ultimately you can, if I was to put it very simple, there are sweet people and salty people and bitter people and so on. So this is one of the many, I mean, it's very detailed. We're simplifying something that does require a lot of study, but essentially part of that road of learning, like any subject, you have to give a considerable amount of time to, and it has its own framework, its epistemology, and so on and so forth, which is how we were, man. We weren't YouTube learning type. The Islamic tradition was: do you have a teacher first and foremost, and have you studied your fiqh? Have you studied your aqidah? These are the fundamental sciences that then lead to other sciences. And if you study classical, you have to study nahu, you have to study balagha, you have to study mantiq, because if you can't reason properly, and you can't understand syntax, how can you understand context of any situation and therefore deduct a solution? It's crazy. Like, you can't reason properly, what problem we're gonna have? And especially if you're post-modern world, like you spoke about the times we live in, so people are forming worldviews of very subjective experiences. First of all, that's poor reasoning. Just because you've never seen this does not mean it could not happen. A. B. You are also unaware of the other variables. So and I just gave you from logic and from nahu, meaning nahu, grammar, teaches you context. So automatically when someone presents something to you or you see something, well, what don't I know about this situation? A. And B, by having reasoning is, well, this is my subjective understanding here. What about from an objective perspective, this idea of inductive and deductive reasoning? Side tangent, point being, we are not jokers, right? We don't whip up stuff. It's like you properly study any subject you study. And so in the same case with the medicine and the psychological frameworks out in our tradition, so rich.
Yeah. I don't know if you grind cacao. Was that something you boil? So that's pretty good for you.
So Ustaz Mohammed, you've spent a considerable amount of time getting people to know themselves, I guess, through the temperaments, through the sciences that you've learned, that you've studied. What are some of the success stories that you've witnessed amongst after getting people to know who they are? Like how fruitful is this knowledge?
Look, when you start to understand your own self, you realize that the greatest contributor to most of the issues that you have is yourself, right? If you take a particular perspective on things, for example, like a slightly optimistic person, this person is inviting maybe a particular type of a conversation, right? How are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. This then will lead to a very pleasant experience. But if you're having very optimistic conversations consistently, what does that do for your conversations? A lot of them won't be grounded. And so you're having these incredible conversations with people, but there's no grounding in that.
Highly ambitious, over ambitious.
At the same manner, you have those who are slightly on the pessimistic side. Or maybe you could say, when they say, I'm not being pessimistic, I'm just being realistic, right? And then to be called those people positive and negative people. Now imagine those two alone. Let's just take these principles for now. What happens with them if they're in a relationship, for example, right? That's what we've seen is that people consider that people are being pessimistic to me, yet unfamiliar with the fact that they're the one contributing by their because they're idealists, and therefore I expect you to be a certain way, I expect you to be a certain way, and the fact that you're not, I need to mention it to you and I need to mention it to you. The moment you realize how you're the one who's invited like 80% of the conversations that you've had, and maybe by just pausing a little bit and then asking a question and so a lot of the types of stuff that we see is that people are like, we were in Australia once, and like not this trip, but previously, at the end, we all sat in a circle, and this brother, he just sat at the end and he goes, I wish I knew this knowledge from before. I wouldn't be getting divorced right now.
Oh no.
You know, and I always say to people, it's not that case of the like, and it's not just temperaments here, it's prophetic principles. It's like, for example, the Prophet ﷺ said, consideration is from God, haste is from the devil. Meaning, don't insta anything like fast food at the window, right? Meaning, even for example, now watch how this assists you in social media. If someone messages you at 1 a.m., you should have a delay policy. Like I like with you because I messaged you at what, like 11 p.m. or something, and you didn't respond until the morning. Because, right, exactly. Because
hastiness is from
there you go. Because you know that, and you've also, mashallah, had a cutoff point from when you were using your phone. I saw one
they're
tick.
trying to reach come after
That is well-being. That is understanding that hukuk of my family at this point. But if I'm jumping on my phone at 10 p.m., 11 p.m., how am I providing the hukuk of my family? So in the same manner.
So I guess you're getting people to know what kind of temperament they have. So if someone's a bit more impulsive on the impulsive side, you can teach him, hey mate, look, you're a bit on the impulsive
exactly.
side.
So once you start to consider that, the idea being is that people can not just simply benefit in their social media usage because now you're not feeding the algorithm, which it works off your instant messaging, but instant generally will be bad for you in that regard. Even comments, just the fact that you have to comment.
Wait, slow down. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. That's very important. Anyways, as you were saying.
But if you have a system that constantly asks you to comment, but when you don't have anything good to say, then you should be silent.
Be silent.
Right. So basically, which means everybody give good comments.
Yes.
Right. And then, for example, and I'm giving you bigger temperaments. Just look at the prophetic principles. From the beauty of a person's Islam is to leave that which does not concern them. So imagine, what does that mean? It means that which has has no meaning for you. So if I have a judgment like, oh well, that's not a good color to wear. Is this my remit of judgment? Does this have meaning for me what color you chose? No. If I go out of that bound, right, which means as in, if I start to comment on stuff that has no meaning for me, what do I do to my Islam? Husn al-Islam. So I'm going to make an ugly Islam if I'm concerned with things out of my concern. But if I'm concerned with that which is within my concern, then it's a beautiful Islam. Sure.
Beautiful.
Just by that principle, right? You are considering, is this my remit of judgment? Does this have meaning for me? If I'm busy with the next kid, but not busy with my kid, as in like, I tell my kid to do X, Y, and Z, but I tell the other kid to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't do it to my own kid, it's never going to go down well. So you're already improving your relationships, your outlook with yourself, even concern that you're having really at this point, like people are stressing out over mad stuff that's happening in the world. But And you should feel it. That's the feeling. But you are responsible for what you can do, right? You save yourself and your family. If you do it and you do it and you do it, we save the street. If each street does it, we save the community, and so on and so forth. So we're a kind of bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. We're not like replace the system. We're like, well, let's change our states and Medina will come.
They're beautiful prophetic principles. I remember a man came to Imam al-Shafi'i and he asked for his age, and then he quoted the hadith. From the perfection of one's Islam is that he leaves off that which doesn't concern him. So basically,
mind your business.
Leave me alone. Don't worry about my age for the time being. So I guess once people know what kind of...
And let me add on to that. And then there's another variation with Imam Shafi. When they asked him, he said, and he gives the reason, he said, if you're older, if somebody asks you your age, if you're older than the person who asked, they'll consider you senile. So they won't even value what you have to say because you're not from my generation. And if you're younger than that person, they'll consider you young. So you don't really have a judgment to value. Basically, people are looking for excuses to just make what you have to say irrelevant in that regard. So, and it was interesting. I remember I was teaching in school and there was a guy who was a teacher. I don't want to blow his cover now. It's been a good while. He basically was working in the department and he was my age, and we were young as teachers, but he looked a lot older than me. And I found how much he was getting paid. I said, how did you get to do that? He said, they all assume I'm like 35. We were like 22, 23. But this is the beauty of like minding your own business. The world becomes a better place. And have you met that person who is concerned with everything other than themselves?
I actually
I'm one of the worst people to be around.
I want to touch upon that because all this knowledge obviously doesn't come from nowhere. You've obviously studied and explore the world for this science, and just obviously being in the company of these teachers. I know you've went to Mauritania and you met some remarkable figures in Mauritania. Would you mind telling us a bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean,
Mind
look,
your own business, brother. I'm joking.
Because you made an interesting analogy once how some people go for this experiential knowledge and they kind of collect all these like stories with the sheikh, like infinity stones on their hands.
yeah. I mean, it's almost, look, what did I mention before? There's the rationalist movement and romantic movement. Now, what I want to mention is some of us have a ultra rationalist perspective of our deen, and some of us have an ultra romanticized understanding of our deen. So it's like just collect stories almost. But the beauty and the point is, our deen is not exclusive on any end. We are rooted in sound knowledge, and we are not people who cut ourselves off from feeling as well. You know, it's not one way or the other, no matter what a person's temperament might want to be. Yeah. So the point being is, so when I went out and I really wanted to see, personally, I wanted to see what is it to see in a human being excellence of the deen. Good Islam. I mean, not just good, amazing Islam, amazing Iman, proper scholarship, and amazing Ihsan. So I'm talking proper. I heard about this particular man, Murabd al-Hajj, and I heard about him from
Rahimahullah, Allah have mercy.
And I just thought, you know, and I remember hearing lots of things about him, how in his youth, you know, he would be praying his tahajjud at the sand dune where the wind was the coldest, right? Just to make it difficult for his nafs. And they said that, you know, his mum covered him so that he didn't feel too much. So he went to another side just to feel, to master the nafs. I mean, this is what it's about. And many other amazing things. And I just thought, what is it like to just be in the presence of those people? And subhanallah, you know, just to witness, and you see amazing people. You see people who are so present with you, so sincere, but mind their own business. They're fascinated with you, but they're not up in your face. It's this kind of really beautiful balance of being present, but not invasive. I mean, it's quite hard to do, especially from where we come from, where we are quite, when we're amazed, we want to just kind of enjoy it entirely, its experience. It's like, tell me everything. And this kind of plays into relationships, you see, because people take this approach in their relationships. So for example, they'll meet somebody, they'll project onto a stranger that this person has understood them. Yeah. Project onto that this person has understood them in a moment, right? And they've got people at home who understand them way differently, but it's based upon the romanticized idea that this person understood me, and that person probably hasn't. And so this is actually part of like you know, the way we have learned the world. So when you go out and you see these places, you start to realize, you actually see the hadith that we mentioned. You see slower living. You see what it means to just sit and spend time in presence, in hudur, but also you see these people who are not, you know, they're painted to us as these like sand dune people who are like these weirdos, like Star Wars, you have the sand people and they're like, oh, you know, shooting. But in reality, and they're based off those actually, like the Bedouins, but when you sit with them, they're talking about some of the most fine points of nuances of language and grammar and poetry. And it's just like, what's going on here? Like, everyone's memorized poetry out there, and that gives them a really acute understanding. Because what shi'r is like, sha'r, like it's like hair, the fineness, and you know this about poetry. Anyone who knows poetry has a great understanding of what's between the lines of what's being said, and a great sense of the sensitivities. The great, you know, that the author does when he writes poetry, and so there's great traditions out there. I mean, they call them the night scholars. Why do they call them the night scholars? Is because they memorize everything. You know, they memorize all the books, so they don't need the light
living
to
encyclopedias. We had Sheikh Mohammed Isaaq last year, literally an encyclopedia, living encyclopedia. And it just goes to show you what the absence of distraction can do for you when you're in an environment which you're practically surrounded by sand everywhere you look, zero distraction, full focus on Quran, full focus on a hadith. It's a phenomenal thing what it can do for you.
That is potential. That is when we're talking about human potential, self-development, excellence, 10x. You know, these guys talking about 10x, 100. That's 10x. That's 100. That's times infinity. That's when you are now with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in remembrance, that you are now transcending almost what would appear to be human limitations. I mean, you know,
Recognize your potential.
We talk about a skit like
through the tradition. Watch this. No, Shuf. You asked for an example. We were in the class. A lady said, we were talking about like balance and perfection of like really a high state of mastering the self. So she said, but we can't do it or something. I said, why did you say we can't do it? Did you say we can't do it because you can't do it? I said, we can do it because they did it. See the difference of the subjective. If I go based off me, then I can't do it. Therefore, I would project onto all of us, we can't hit that. But when we see that Sayyidina Ali was ripping a door that 40 men couldn't carry, then we can do it. Then my potential is his potential. Shuf, that's the beauty of the mirror, because it's like it's mirroring back what's possible. This is the beauty. Did you know when the Persians would teach the parrots to speak, they would put a one-sided mirror and the parrot would see another parrot, but behind that would be the trainer. And the trainer would be speaking and the parrot would assume another parrot is speaking, and therefore it would assist it in its goal. This is why we were sent, the Prophet ﷺ, when we were sent, and you saw it transform from these amazing people, and just to live and to hear their lives, that's what we need. You know, Imam Ahmad, when she was fire, I was water. When I was fire, she was water. You know, talk about temperaments. You know, she was aware that when he's like this, and he goes, we never had arguments.
SubhanAllah. On that point, you just opened up the door of Imam Ahmad recognizing the temperament or the present temperament of his spouse, and he's able to, I guess, mitigate any problems. You've also said that you've had a student that actually came up to you and say to you that I wish I knew this knowledge because it would have saved me from a looming divorce. Break this concept down for us. Like, really go into it. Teach us how we can utilize this knowledge to save our relationships. Like, we're going to have people watching this from home that are probably struggling, that are going through hard times. How can they use this knowledge to save themselves, save them families, and foster harmony?
Good. What I would say is, first of all, study the subject. Just to clarify for people, I don't want people Googling this type of stuff, because there's blogs, there's all these kind of reductive perspectives out there. But ultimately, you have the understanding of the mizaj. You have, in the most simple terms, a more fiery person. You need to understand that this fiery person, if you're a teacher, you have a fiery student. These fiery students are mostly misunderstood. I was teaching a group of archers, Which from the four elements, which element do you think is close to archery? Earth. Grounded, focused, tunnel vision. Which temperament do you think is close to? Melancholic. Excellent. So archery by its nature. So when I'm sitting with all these archers, I literally see this whole group of archers and I'm like, literally, there's no cholerics amongst you, no sanguines amongst you. Yeah, they all started laughing because it's closer to their mizaj. So this is basically, for those who are wondering, that you have these different mizaj. This would be a dominant melancholic mizaj. So all of this is within all of us, but you have these different dominant. So you could say a more fire, a more earth, a more air, which is sanguineous, and a more water mizaj. Now the point being is so
I'm getting a bit of Captain Planet vibes right now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The Last Airbender probably be a better reference, which is probably influenced from the temperaments, just as the Beatles and Winnie the Pooh, Rudolph Steiner's schooling system actually uses the temperaments to group and classify groups of students. I don't really agree with it, but whatever. Anyway, so I said to them, describe fire to me as a personality. Just a quick question. Many of them gave negatives: angry, fire, like scary, fury, blah blah blah. And I basically showed them, and then I asked them to describe earth and water. They gave me all positives. What's happened there?
It shows you
they've identified where they stand.
No, their temperament is very close to their nafs, so they have a natural bias towards that which is close to them in nature. People have a water temperament, which is a phlegmatic temperament, like people who are also more like that. And they can easily misunderstand those of an opposite nature. So people who are more fiery are mostly understood. Now, people who are fiery right now, who when they hear a fiery person, some people had a natural positive inclination to that, ambitious, driven, and so on. But those who have an unhealthy or haven't developed that part of themselves would have a slightly biased or averse perspective to that. So I said to them, that imagine a fiery kid comes to your archery club, look at the default bias you had towards that, because you all process that. And that's what happens to all these fiery kids in school. Some of them were amazing. Yeah, you assume that they're bullies. Look at you, you judgmental guy, right? Look at what happens is they are judged very quickly in that context by a particular standard, and that's why there's so many guys who are fiery in school, highly talented, but were because of their behavior problems, they were put into lower sets and lower sets and lower sets, and so we limited their options, so they went on to in other avenues and succeeded in other ways. In the same manner, so you have your more quicker temperament, slower temperament. So imagine a parent who's a quicker temperament and another quicker temperament have a slower temperament child, and they have another quick temperament child. So quick parents, one quick, one slow. What's the experience of the slower one?
No one understands him.
Yeah, he's gonna feel like he's belittled in the family.
Yeah, too slow, takes his time, always late, blah, blah, blah. And the quick one's the natural champion according to this particular. So if the parents don't balance their own mizaj out, you know, and that can lead to like trauma cases. So you want something like there's literally
let's go to marriage. Let's fast track.
I mean, I was just gonna say there's people who got promotion at work, people who got scholarship for university. I mean, we have literally I think about 500, 600 testimonials of messages, like ridiculous. We don't even group them anymore. We had like highlights and we just stopped because it was a bit too much. But yeah, in the case of a relationship, in a very easy way for people to try this, just look at the kind of energy that the person is giving off. And just work around it. If you're seeing this person getting fiery, right? The fire's building up. If you go in with fire, what's going to happen?
Fire makes the fire more furious.
It's like everybody already knows it. What did I say to you? The signs are outside and inside. You already know this. You have to take that water approach. But if somebody's taking too much of a water approach, right? You got to bring the fire. That's why if you go to the gym and you're like, well, what do I feel like training today? That's not how you train in the gym. So you have a PT who's like, you pathetic little worm, get the fire up. And you're like, right? Rocky IV. Yeah. The whole philosophy. So this is an easy way to start to determine, what sort of an energy is that person at. And if you can keep it, if you see that consistent behavioral pattern, this person most likely would be a dominant choleric or a dominant fire mizaj person, just to keep it very simple. And then you have the more optimists and the more pessimists, the sanguines and the phlegmatics. And they are the difference of air and earth. So that husband comes home, honey, I'm home, and then he plays a scenario, doesn't go well because she's like, yeah, did you do this task? And he's like, okay, I love you. And she's like, yeah, can you cut the grass? And he's like, your hair looks nice today. And she's like, yeah, good. We need to take the kids to this place. Now he's looking, look at love languages stemming from that, right? He wants that expression, right? He wants the energy, the vibe. And for her, and so now they're sitting in couples counseling 6 weeks later, and he's like, look, I tell her I love her. I want her to share beautiful words because then that will tell me she loves me. And she's like, bro, I hope she didn't say bro. She's like, look, I've did this for the kids. I did this. I did. What you mean? I don't love you. This is my love for you.
Act of service.
Right? So she's looking for something like that. I wouldn't fully align it with Gary Chapman's model of love languages. It's a particular based framework. Particular based frameworks work in particular. This is more universal. So what works what worked now will work in 10 years, 15, 20 years, 30, 40. That's why this science was developed over 2,500 years, just understanding the temperaments. And there's other videos I've done on that.
You mentioned in one of your classes about Surah Al-Rum.
Yeah.
How it acknowledges.
وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, verse 21 to 24, Allah speaks about a series of signs, starts it off, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ. Allah mentions a series of signs. The next verse, a series of signs. The next verse, for 4 verses you have, and Allah says, and these are the signs for people, and then He gives a particular way of coming to know things. So He says, yes, Marwal, He says, those who يَعْقِلُونَ, and then there's those who there are those who listen, those who know, those who think, and those who reflect. So aqal and the tafakkur, from I can remember, or fikr. 3 different ways to come to know something. Yeah. Then the next verse says وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, but there's no group mentioned. So there's a clear-cut grouping of 4 types of learners in the Quran, verse 21 to 24, Surah Al-Rum. So you can, and if you know your temperaments and mizaj, you can easily make your connection which one is which. So you can see that even, you can just see blatantly there. And those who know the temperaments can make that connection pretty quick.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So having the ability to acknowledge what your spouse is, what temperament they have, you're able to mitigate many situations very easily, and you're able to, I guess, foster that harmony
Look,
despite your temperament.
Yeah, look, this isn't about temperament identity. This isn't about identifying yourself with your temperament. It's just one part of who you are. There are many factors, but nature has an automatic and a subconscious kind of a nature to it, which means that it pops up often. For example, I'll give you a quick example of a sanguine and a melancholic. Imagine a sanguineous spouse. He comes home and he says, and this is the most social. Right, the sanguine is the most social. It moves around a lot. Melancholic is more grounded, so it's a lot more stationary. Right. So the sanguine husband says, "Let's go out to eat," and the melancholic wife says, "Let's stay at home." Okay. Now, what are they hearing? The sanguine's hearing, "I don't want to stay at home with you." The melancholic's hearing, "I don't want to." The melancholic's hearing, "I don't want to stay at home with you." The earth one, and the sanguine's hearing, "I don't want to go out with you." As long as we have a self-centered approach, we will always be, why is this person not serving me? Why are they not coming to my level? This is the phenomena that you see before people get married, before they get married, where they talk about this idea of, "Oh, I think I'm settling." And I'm like, well, you think that person's not settling with you? This kind of arrogance that seeps into this self-centered individual. No offense to anybody, but just consider what I'm saying for your own sake. In the same manner, you have, this notion where people say, they say, "Oh my gosh, I met a girl and she's just like you," and people get so happy. Yeah, why are you that special that a female version of you would just be so amazing? So if you start, let's look at affirmations. If you start your day saying, "Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min sharri nafsi wa min sharri that," but just start with just stick with that, then you will not be running around having this idea, female version of me, dear, I got a lot of work to do. Maybe I should have somebody who's going to assist me rather than just compliment me in who I am. This self-satisfied. This is not. We're not talking about nafs al-mutma'inna here. This is amara bisu, and if you got amara, there's the self that commands to evil, and you got your preferences. Well, what will happen then? You got your laptop, I've got my laptop. You have your food in that room, and you can watch your shows, and I'll have my food in this room, and I'll watch my shows. And then a few years later, now they're talking about how they need to learn to eat together, and someone's going to give a groundbreaking theory. Research was done that families who eat together are happier. What the heck's going on?
We've had this for the past 1400 years within our tradition.
It's just human beings. Even before that, they were doing that. Human beings knew. Like, I used to have a beautiful auntie. She used to come to my house. Amazing person, Allah yarhamaha. She used to come to our house. She would stay till quite late, just sitting there talking to my mom. Sometimes my mom would go to sleep. We're playing PlayStation. Auntie's still hanging around. Then she'd go home. That was the counseling that we had within our villages. Now our villages have been taken apart. How many times have you heard it takes a village to raise a child? It takes a village to do this. It takes a village to that. When you get rid of the and this is, the Jalik in nature to break up the whole. And once you take out the village, what happens?
Nothing left.
Everyone needs to go get counseling. Trying.
Ustad, I guess one of the most powerful verses in the Quran when it comes to knowing yourself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hashr, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهِ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم. Do not be like those who forgot Allah, so they were made to forget themselves. How can knowing yourself ultimately allow you to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
There's so many ways, And ulaikum al-fasiqun, right? The second part, that will be transgression. When you start to know God, you start to come to know yourself. So when you start to understand that there's beginninglessness of God and endlessness of God, you are automatically aware of the temporality of yourself, of every experience, of that which makes you happy, that which makes you sad, etc., etc. So instantly, by doing a good Aqidah class, you are now not stressed about that which you were stressed about in the same manner, simply because now you know that this thing will come and this will go. In the same way, when you see that beautiful person and you're like, oh, happiness awaits me. Right? I want to spend the rest of my life with this person, right? You start to see, what am I being drawn to really? And arafa nafsahu, just pause for a second. What are you being drawn to? Is it the beauty that you're seeing in that person, or is it that beauty that inherently has? And what is that beauty? If it's echoing anything, what is the origin of that beauty? And so the same one who provided me that beauty would provide it in, oh wait, I'm married, right? Maybe my wife has that, for example, right? Point being is that it's endless. Nobody who went and did anything incredible with their life or amazing or anything did it, except that they had to really face themselves. A good example is this: when you travel, and you know, people have this where I come from, especially, people are like, oh, you know, the world's in it's a mazza right now, and I need to we need to just go out, man. Let's just go here and let's just live there, and it's going to be good. And so I'm like, go try it out, because when you go there, you find the same nafs that you found where your locality was, and you blamed everything but yourself. That's why the next stage after nafs al-amara is nafs al-lawama, which is the self-accusing soul. But what does the modern world teach us? It's everybody else's fault but your own. You will never grow, but when you say, what did I do? Nafs al-lawama, you will automatically start to grow. When arafa nafsahu, will start to realize Allah's put me in this place. I'll tell you something about temperaments. One of the most common things. People do the temperament class. The same mizaj that was opposite to them, that rubbed them the wrong way, when they realize that this is actually there to complete me, the same person that would tick them off is now they want to kiss that person's hand, because they realize Allah sent you to me to
help
complete me and help me. I can learn and complete my possibilities through you.
And you help balance me out as an individual,
And
as a
people,
person.
I had a guy message me. He said, I healed the relationship with my late father. Allahu Akbar. His father passed away. He understood him. He understood why he was the way he was. Priceless. Lots of those messages, you know. Anyway, alhamdulillah.
You also mentioned about suhbah and encouraging people to travel. I know, subhanAllah, just some years ago, you knew a brother that was quite close to you, who was on this journey of knowledge. And, you know, he would always say, you know, since you were teaching back in the days in Birmingham, you know, if everybody was asking where you go, I'm going with Isaaq, I'm going with Isaaq.
Yeah, he had a lot of love for us, me and my older brother, and all my family as well. And we loved his family. And there was these two guys, Dawud and Ansar. Allah yarhamuhu, Ansar, that Dawud, he passed away. But when we were young, these young lads came into the mosque. We were close to the mosque, like growing up, alhamdulillah. And this is something that I would advise young people. It's like, just really connect your heart to the mosque as much as you can. And even for adults, and I say to myself, because I'm traveling a lot, it's a bit hard, but it's very important to do that. You guarantee yourself the shade of Allah yawm al-qiyamah. Anyway, and these young lads came, and we would be in the mosque, and they would be at all the gatherings, and they would be at the different Quran recitation, whatever was going on. They were there. They were very good disposition, really good lads. They were always ready to help out. They helped out me, they helped out my brother, lots and lots of stuff. We did street cleanups, we did all types of stuff, and they were there. And then we went to study, and my older brother went to study as well, and he'd been studying from before anyway. So he was like a full-blown, mashallah, he was kind of just finishing up his studies. And then when we both came back, Dawud and Ansar, mashallah, they were ready to just help, like, you know, Isaaq, bhai, what do we do? What do you like? What can we do? And they were very active, and mashallah, the sincerity of these guys, and they would be like, how could we reach that level? And we'd say, look, just exhaust your local, you know, go up and down, find those good teachers, sit with them, get advice, learn, study. So they were very consistent. They studied with my older brother quite a lot, very sincere. And then one of them had decided that I'm going to go and study. And I'm telling you, you call this guy anytime, and he would have been there for you. 100%, both the brothers. So Dawud gets the go ahead from his parents. They say, go on. And Yemen is difficult. So, you know, they spoke to our family, and my older brother was like, look, trust me, he's a good place to go. And it's safe. So what happens is he goes there, unfortunate situation, car accident. And he passes away.
Wow.
And as he passes away, he gets buried in a place in Zambal Cemetery. He is the only British lad who's ever been buried in the Zambal. You know who's in the Zambal? Just straight scholars, legendary scholars of the Islamic tradition, and some Sahaba who had traveled. And they say, the people of Badr Sahaba. Wallah, I can't remember exactly. But look at where his end was. He died. When you are seeking knowledge, and my advice to everybody here, like, seek knowledge, because for as long as you're seeking knowledge, Allah opens a pathway to you. If you pass away, you go to Jannah. This is the beauty of seeking knowledge. And he sought knowledge, and look at him. He had like a rank, and he had thousands and thousands and thousands of people praying for him. he became a sign that he's doing da'wah to people right now. He reached such a pinnacle. It's just incredible that to be buried in such a beautiful, honorable place. And it just shows that as young people, you know, to really give your time for studying, and who knows where Allah will take you, and maybe you'll come back. But I said to my brother, I said, look, all this time we spoke to him, we inspired him of stories of the friends of God, and all this time he was the friend of God.
Yeah.
He really was. And it just shows, just have high himmah, have high aspirations. I would have loved to have passed away. You know how many times I remember once I was on the plane started shaking, and I really wanted to go. I love, alhamdulillah, like I wasn't like all depressed on that.
Yeah,
you know, but
if you need help, I can.
thank you, I appreciate that. I was reading Imam Ghazali and a couple of different classes, and there's different books that I was reading. I was on the plane, and I just had this moment. So I started put my hands up and said, "Oh Allah, I just did tawbah." And this is during my studies, and I was like, "Oh Allah, this is my intention." So I made high intentions, and I said, "Oh Allah, if you think it's right, just take me in this moment. You know, if it's better for my life, if it means that I will not have more sins, blah blah blah." You know, went in, proper sincere. I cried or something, and then the plane started to shake, and I said, "Is this my time?" Allah, it's true story. I genuinely, I thought I was going down. The plane's shaking like the most, and I've done lots of flights, and the plane's shaking, and so I tied my shoelaces. I said, you know, I just felt like my shoelaces need to be tied as I die. I don't know. I guess now I know that that's, you know, knowing yourself. Yeah, if I die, I want my shoelaces tied. Anyway, and I was ready to go, and I was there with my shahada, because ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And then I was ready. I was like, and then it started to calm down. I was like, oh no, not more time with this nafs.
What was your phone wallpaper?
I had most under my phone. I read Imam Jazuli. You know Imam Jazuli of the Dalal al-Khairat. There's a beautiful story of when he was in his khalwa and he was doing an incredible recitation of Quran and etc. Lots of salawat and incredible. Like if you read it, it's just, so how did he do it? And when they went to his room, they sent his father to check in his room how he's doing, and he just found maut everywhere. And he realized, you know, he's in a different place. I was just saying that. So I made my wallpaper maut faj'atan, sudden death. And then I was on the airplane once, and I was like, yeah, I should change this, because it literally was like, you know. But the point is that like we aspire, but Allah gives it to whoever He gives it, and these things are possible. You can have this transformation. The Deen is the real deal. Whatever you want. We were in a class once. And I said to them, you know, I said that it's so real that I said to one of the lads, if Allah wants, He right now we can leave the room and there's just a Ferrari there. Do you like a Ferrari? He goes, yeah, I like a Ferrari. I said, a Ferrari outside. Do you believe it? And he goes, I said, why didn't you put your hand up? I said, you don't believe it? He said, no. I said, put your hand up. I said, say yes. He goes, yeah. I said, what sort of a belief in God do you have? I said, come on. So everyone's laughing and he's laughing. I'm like, but just let that ruh flow through you. Let me see belief, man. Like you let it flow. And he goes, yes. Yeah. He goes, yes. I'm like, you get a microwave. You wouldn't know. So he goes, yes. And you won't. And so anyway, the class finishes and we wrap up. He goes outside. He comes back. He goes, did you know? I said, no, what? He goes, no way.
He's playing.
Yeah. He's having your moment. Yeah. He goes, there's a Ferrari outside. And then one of the other girls comes in for the students of the class. She goes, I kid you not, there's a Ferrari outside. And I looked at him, I said, nah, do you believe me? You know, Allah's signs are all in front of us. And they just take a moment to, you know, just where are you? Where are you in relation to God? And this is what Allah is asking us, where are you going? You know, and you know, it's fa'ina. So then where are you going? Because Allah knows you've been going somewhere. And so then where are you going? Because He also knows how you got on with your going. Yeah.
Where are we going?
Yeah.
I've heard many other cheeky narrations of you were saying about something else with the student, how asking about he questioned your car, and he goes, if you've made it out in life, how come you drive the car that you drive?
Yeah, I was teaching the lads in the mosque and back in the day, and I was like saying, look, if Allah wants, He can give you a car, give you a fancy car. Money's nothing. Money means there's no value in money. The true richness is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Izhad nafsak, from the dunya, and Allah will love you. And they're like, and we used to bring a lot of lads back into mosque who do stop coming to mosque. So one of the more cheeky lads who had been kicked out on previous occasions, and so now we bring in the cheeky because we know temperaments, right? Even though I didn't know temperaments, but I knew that people have different types. So don't, there's no one type of kid who should be in mosque necessarily. There should be akhlaq building. Anyway, so he goes, Ustad Isaaq, it's all good and well you saying it. You drive a banger, yeah? Well, it's easy to say money's nothing when you got no money. And I said to him, do you think Allah can't give me? If Allah wanted, He could give me a new car every single day. I could drive a new fancy car every day. I said, do you believe it? Yeah. And he was like, yeah. Then I go home. I have a lot of siblings. And they all have, alhamdulillah, nice cars. So I'm driving one day, a Jag. Yeah. So I'm just driving in there, and he's like, all right. He sees me. He goes, I said, what did I tell you? Yeah. So I went home. There was a 1 Series at home. I jumped the car, pulled the 1 Series out. I went straight back there. I said, he's like, and I said, didn't I tell you Allah can give you a different car every day? It's irrelevant. Never think the causal relationships that people assume to be the real reason why are you listening? Do you think it's microphones? Do you think it's microphones and cameras as to why you're listening? Sure.
Allah wanted you.
Allah, you could be watching this and not be listening.
MashaAllah. Ustad, we've had a phenomenal conversation with you. I'll end on one last question. Because you've laid down all the groundwork of knowing yourself. But as much as we try to know ourselves, Ustad, I guess we'll never truly know who we are. Like as much as we try to just delve into ourselves, but then you read Surah Al-Qaf, أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْكُم مِّنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. That Allah, He's closer to you than your jugular vein. Alimun bidhati sudur. He knows what's in your heart. At times we don't even know what's in our heart. He knows us better than we know ourselves. How does that speak to you?
Well, that's what Allah's told us, خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. We made him in the best of forms, and then we lowered him to the lowest of the low. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ فَلَهُمْ أَجْرٌ غَيْرُ مَمْنُونٍ. Except those who do good actions and who believe and who do good actions. And then what does he conclude with, right? فَمَا يُكَذِّبُكَ بَعْدُ بِالدِّينِ أَلَيْسَ اللَّهُ بِأَحْكَمِ الْحَاكِمِينَ. But is not Allah the greatest of all judges? Is the judge of all judges? Reminding us of what? It reminds us that ultimately we are on this journey, but everything is in Allah's hands, even our self-knowledge and what we do with it. And so this is the beginning of the journey. And it goes on. Imam Ghazali said, there was nothing more difficult for me than my nafs. It's an ongoing journey. The point of this is that, as Sayyidina Abu Bakr said, "Oh Allah, don't hold me to account for what they say about me, because I know myself better than they know me, and you know me better than I know myself." And so no matter what a person says, and no matter what we start to consider, ultimately the judgment is with God. And as scary as that is, thank goodness judgment is with God. And so that's why, even for this, what we've been just speaking about, these issues that people have about self-esteem and confidence and so on and so forth, and value, thank goodness that God is the determiner. So what people have said to you is not that big of a deal. If you have done right by God, sure. And that's what it comes down to. Alhamdulillah, it's a journey, it's a road. But everything is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like you said, we have many verses. This is something that is recommended, in the particular different variations of the scholars recommend of what to read in the evenings. This is something you read, and I give my affair to God. And God is watchful over all the believers. I seek refuge in Allah, who hears and He knows. He hears your situation. He knows your situation. So as much as you are doing right by knowing yourself and working on yourself and the moral responsibility that you have, you do your homework. You do your part. And then you know that as long as you're trying your best, you look to Allah and you seek by His lutf and His rahmah, and this is what it comes down to. May Allah have mercy on us and all those who are listening.
May Allah enable us to know who we are
Ameen.
as true slaves and servants of Allah, to foster our connection with Him, to foster our connection with ourselves by knowing ourselves, to ultimately foster our connection with Allah.
And awake that high potential that's within ourselves that we all know that we can reach, and that ma'rifah, getting closer to Allah and experiencing that.
Yeah, I'll finish with the dua I'll give everybody. I think it's very important. Remind everybody. Remind everybody, remind myself. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ahu wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinaba. In this time that we live in, where falsehood and truths are being conflated and so on, it's so important to say, oh Allah, show us the truth as the truth truly is and grant us the ability to follow it. Or show us falsehood as falsehood truly is and grant us the ability to avoid it.
Cool.
Because this is what we need. These are the realities, to see things as they truly are, so we can continue these roads of self-knowledge, because there's a lot of self-knowledge out there that's crap. That's false. And people's false identities of themselves. And imagine you go into marriage saying, oh, I'm like this. And then you get married, they're like, yeah, you ain't like that. That's the beauty of, one of the beauties of real muhasaba, muraqaba. This is what the temperament classes are all about. It's not just, personality profiles. It's really consider who you are, consider the most consistent behavioral patterns, work out on that, what where you are in regards to that. And when you can start to then learn to work on yourself and your road of eradication of vices, adorning yourself of virtues. That's
essentially
that is the whole journey here. Don't ask anybody their temperament. That's not your business. Don't ask, never justify your actions by your mizaj. That's not the purpose of it. But it's rather to hold yourself to a higher standard. And when you feel sad, you can see that Allah has given you many virtues within your mizaj. And so self-esteem and all this type of stuff is just, it's just perfectly kept in this, equilibrium of care of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you are in such a beautiful place. And that's why the whole tawakkul concept, anyway, sort of a conversation.
No, it's absolutely beautiful.
It's been an absolute remarkable, memorable even conversation. I'm sure we could have delved into hours into your countless stories, life experiences, and mashallah, knowledge, of course. It's like, for those watching at home, where can they find you online?
Don't find me. Yeah. We have an Instagram page, Isaaq.Muhammad, Facebook, another Instagram page, knowing.yourself, I think. And we have a Facebook page, Knowing Yourself, as well. And a website, and you could just Google Knowing Yourself, Mohammed Isaaq, and I'm sure the first one will come up. And then if you have any questions, you can email. We have lots of many of our classes that we have, they're all available online, and if you have any questions, you can always email, inshallah. Everybody should follow these guys. They're doing good work in a very good manner. They have one of the most important things that we need in work is having ihsan, having excellence, because ihsan is beauty making. When Muslims do things properly, they make things beautiful and it's attractive and it's nice. And the da'wah is not in what we say, but in how we are, in our actions. Inna Allah la yanzuru ila surikum wa la ajsadikum walakin yanzuru ila qulubikum wa a'malikum. That Allah does not look at your forms, doesn't look at your Instagram account, doesn't look at your nouns, your titles. Allah looks at qulubikum wa a'malikum, your hearts and your actions. And I've seen here at this place at OnePath, nice hearts, very beautiful actions. And I really pray that Allah keeps you guys steadfast in this road. And I said this to you guys offline, and I'm just sitting, it's just coming out. Allah bless you.
May Allah make us
better, be as we see.
better than what people perceive. And forgive us for that which they do not know. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Don't forget to find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.